The Ducks finally round out the rest of their coaching staff. I'll tell you why who they got is very important, and also some details on the upcoming Rookie Faceoff taking place here in Southern California. All this and more on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason J.D. Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. All right, let's talk about the big news that took place in Anaheim, and this is actually pretty massive news. And as someone that has been covering minor league hockey for about a decade, this is pretty significant news. And we're going to start with the new assistant coaches actually, before I get to the assistant coaches, I have to talk about the position that Sudsy is now taking over. And this is a pretty big deal. The Ducks named Maharaj the director of goaltending. Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. And this was mentioned during the draft. This was mentioned before the second pick in the first round, where Maharaj had been battling cancer, and he's beaten cancer, but he's now the director of goaltending, which does a couple of things. It opens up a spot for a new goaltending coach, which we'll get to momentarily. And also, this means that Maharaj does not have to be in the Ducks offices all the time. Like, his day-to-day duties change. He doesn't have to be there every day. He can now take on a bit of a mentorship role. Being the director, he doesn't have to report every hour, every day. And it takes off some of the pressure from having to be the goaltending coach. So good for Sudsy to become the director of goaltending. I think this is a big deal. Sudsy has been with the Ducks for 11 seasons. He was the goaltending coach for the past 7 years, back to 2017. And he first came on as a consultant with Norfolk and the San Diego Gulls back in 2013. But he had pancreatic cancer. Folks, pancreatic cancer is a fairly serious cancer. It does get to a lot of people, and the fact that he is now cancer-free, I mean, hat tip to him for surviving it, because pancreatic cancer does not have a high survival rate. So I mean, I've done this before, but got to give my applause to Sudsy for pulling through and now becoming the director of goaltending. So that leaves a couple more spots in the coaching staff, another assistant coach and a goaltending coach. And this is a pretty big one. I had not mentioned this before. Brent Thompson is going to be one of the assistant coaches for the Anaheim Ducks this coming season. And they made a couple of more hires, both of which are very important. Tim Army. I'm starting with Tim Army, who is the other assistant coach, the final assistant coach the Ducks are going to hire. He's 61. He's had a ton of experience. He has been a head coach in the American Hockey League and the NCAA, also an assistant coach in the National Hockey League for over a dozen years. He was the assistant in Anaheim all the way back in 1993. He was the first assistant coach from 93 to 97, and was also the assistant from 97 to 02 with Washington. And also of importance, he was an assistant coach with the Colorado Avalanche last decade, and has also been part of the Colorado organization. So why is that important? You say, I'll tell you why. Because the head coach, as most of you know, is Greg Cronin, who has been part of the Colorado organization for the previous few seasons, just becoming the Ducks coach last season. So Greg Cronin is definitely familiar with Army having been with the Colorado organization for all those years. He was an assistant in Wilkes-Barre a few years ago. He was also an assistant coach at Team USA World Championships back in the 90s and also again in 2013. And he was also the associate coach for China during their Olympic qualifying in 23-24. So Army has been around a bit, but he's got so much experience, and that can only be a good thing for the Ducks. This other hire, I think, is very important, and I do want to talk about this a little bit more. The goaltending coach, or the new goaltending coach for the Anaheim Ducks, is none other than Peter Budaj. Yes, that Peter Budaj, who played for the Montreal Canadiens, who played for the Colorado Avalanche, who played for the Los Angeles Kings, who had a resurgence with the Ontario Reign. So I'll just talk about Budaj for a second. Budaj played for Colorado. Montreal, was unceremoniously ousted of Montreal. And then in 2014, 2015, he didn't have a good year with St. John's. In fact, he didn't have a win in over a dozen starts. And it looked like his career was over. Nobody was signing him. And it was thought that he was going to retire. And then he came out to a tryout for the Ontario Reign back in September 2015, right when the Reign were moving from Manchester to Ontario, California, in the midst of that whole Western exodus of teams. And this was that strange year in the American Hockey League when there was a large migration of teams from the East Coast to the West Coast. That was the year when you had the Stockton Heat come in, or Stockton Thunder. That was the same year that Bakersfield came in. The Gulls, the Reign, they all came in, the Condors, they all came in at the same time, as well as the San Jose Barracuda. And Budaj, I mean, some thought that he was not going to even make the Ontario Reign, just being a tryout. And he impressed enough during the training camp to get an invite to be on the preseason roster. He was a backup at the time. I'm gonna just mention this. He was not going to be the starting goaltender until he impressed during the preseason. And during those first couple of games that he started, that's when it was apparent, oh, wait a minute. You know what? Maybe this is our guy. He got a couple wins under his belt, his first couple of starts. He's looking pretty good. So he had a resurgence in Ontario, won the Bastion Award for best goaltender in the American Hockey League with the goals against under 2. He led the Ontario Reign to the playoffs, led them to the Western Conference Finals, only to get ousted by the Lake Erie Monsters in 2016. Actually, Lake Erie swept Ontario in 2016 and then subsequently swept the Hershey Bears to win the Calder Cup. But anyway, that 2016 team was a special one for the Ontario Reign and a large resurgence for Peter Budaj. After that, the sky became the limit. He became a starter for the Los Angeles Kings after Jonathan Quick went down with injury. At the time, the backup goaltender was Jeff Zatkoff, but Budaj beat him out for that job. So Budaj became the number 1 starter. Zatkoff became the backup for the Kings. When Quick came back, Budaj remained in Los Angeles, and Zatkoff became the number 1 starter for the Ontario Reign, and that did not end well for Zatkoff at all. So back to Budaj. He eventually retired in 2019. I actually have a funny anecdote about Peter Budaj, which I'm probably not going to have time for here, but I happened to be working Budaj's final professional game in Ontario back in April 2019. He could not have been nicer, could not have been more gracious, just one of the true gentlemen in hockey. So when I saw that he was hired, I immediately just smiled and went, good for Budaj. He's worked hard. I mean, he's worked very hard over the past decade to get to a good point, and now he is the goaltending coach with the Anaheim Ducks. But why is it super important that Budaj is named the coach? There's a couple specific reasons for this, and I realize that I'm up against it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the importance of having Peter Budaj as a goaltending coach, and we'll get to that on the other side. And now, a brief word from eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience doubly underlined. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to episode number 906 of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. And sorry I went off on that little tangent there, but I just have vivid memories of Peter Budaj playing with the Ontario Reign, and nothing but good memories. And I'm just super happy for Peter Budaj. It'll be good to see him around the rink. So why is this hire important, and why specifically was Budaj chosen? Well, there's actually a lot of reasons why Peter Budaj is the perfect choice, and also what this might have to do with the Ducks' future. I'm going to start with the obvious. After Peter Budaj retired, he became a goaltending coach and wound up being the goaltending coach for the Colorado Eagles, who were coached by none other than Greg Cronin. As you may know, Greg Cronin was the previous head coach for the Colorado Eagles up until last season. And Cronin brought Budaj on, and it was nothing but good news for Colorado. Budaj was instrumental in really developing Pavel Francouz, who later became a starting goaltender for the Colorado Avalanche, helped out Keith Kincaid, Justus Annunen. Budaj has worked really well with goaltenders in that Colorado development system. So he's done a pretty solid job. Yeah, I mean, that's the way I would put it. He's done a solid job with the guys that they have. So Budaj has the credentials. He is very well known in the goaltending world. I mean, he's just one of those guys that everyone seems to like and everyone seems to respect. So big props to the Ducks for bringing him on. And you know, Greg Cronin was just chomping at the bit to hire his former goaltending coach in Colorado and wanted to bring him to Anaheim and bring him along for the ride. So this was a perfect hire. Cronin and Budaj already have a familiarity. They know each other. They trust each other. They succeeded with each other. The Colorado Eagles were just a solid team with both those guys at the helm. Colorado would go on to win playoff rounds in the American Hockey League, and they were always just a good playoff-bound team. So that's one reason why getting Peter Budaj was a perfect hire, that familiarity. But this, I think, is actually a little bit more important, if not as important. But this is something that I thought about immediately when I saw Peter Budaj's name on there. Peter Budaj is from Czechoslovakia. He's actually from that western part of Slovakia, but at the time it was Czechoslovakia. Lukáš Dostal is from the Czech Republic at the time, which is now Czechia. Yeah, Dostal is from the eastern part of Czechia, and actually the towns where both those guys grew up were only about 100 or so miles apart. So not too far. It's like the distance from Los Angeles to Coachella Valley. Not super far, but at least close enough that their hometowns aren't a super long distance away. They both speak the Czechoslovakian language. So just a little brief history lesson here. The Czech Republic split apart in the 90s. If you're a frequent watcher of War on the World as Carmen Sandiego, it used to be Czechoslovakia, then it became the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and it is now Czechia and Slovakia. That was back in the 90s. Czechia became the name just a few years ago. And so Lukáš Dostál played internationally for Czechia. Of course, he won gold with Czechia. Peter Budaj played internationally for Czechoslovakia, but Slovakia, as it turns out. So there's a non-language barrier there. There's a familiarity there. They are familiar with each other, Dostál and Budaj, from their frequent meetings in the American Hockey League when Colorado played San Diego frequently. So they're definitely familiar with each other. And I'm sure that Peter Budaj has nothing but respect for Lukáš Dostál. I mean, he had a front row seat to Dostál just torching the Colorado Eagles a couple of times back in 2021 and 2022. So Budaj has seen this. Part of me thinks, this is a little bit important to have your goaltending coach speak the same language as your possible future number one goalie. Might that have something to do with that? I mean, I'm not saying it 0% doesn't, but there could be that 1% off chance that maybe that has a slight bit to do with that. I'm not going to start conspiracy theories. I'm not going to start any theories at all. But I just think it's important to have that comfort level of your sort of countrymen, not really countrymen, but they are similar countries. The Czech language and the Slovak language are almost inseparable. I mean, there's so many similar words in both languages that they could speak each other's languages easily. So that just could be another reason to bring Budaj on. Maybe the Ducks are ready to move on from John Gibson. I mean, there's been those rumors for the last few years. It seems like an eternity we have heard those constant rumors about John Gibson getting traded. John Gibson getting traded this. John Gibson getting traded that. John Gibson going here. John Gibson going there. John Gibson possibly going to Pittsburgh. How about going to this city? Yeah, I'm familiar with the rumors. I've heard them so much. Do I think John Gibson is going to stick around? I mean, yes, there is always the strong possibility that John Gibson is going to leave the Ducks and get traded, which is also why I think it's important for the Ducks to sign Dostál to an extension sooner rather than later. You do not want to lose Lukáš Dostál. And bringing in someone like Peter Budaj, I think, is only going to help Dostál want to stay with Anaheim in the future, especially after this year if Peter Budaj stays. And if the plan works out, if the Ducks do improve this season with Bednar and now his coaching staff that he got to choose, not just inherited, then you would think certain players would want to stick around in Anaheim and the rebuild would start to get better. Nothing but good news that Cronin got to handpick his assistants, and that rounds out the roster. So just to recap, the current coaches for the Anaheim Ducks are Greg Cronin, your assistants, Tim Army, Brent Thompson, Richard Clune, goaltending coach, Peter Budaj. Yeah, I love it. We're going to head into the second intermission, and I'm going to talk about the Rookie Faceoff that's going to take place here in Southern California. Stay locked in. And now a brief word from FanDuel. And I love sports so much, and I never want them to stop. But with the playoffs over and so many fewer games, it's pretty much baseball right now. There's not as many sports as I would like. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, folks, gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And once again, you are locked in with Jason JD Hernandez talking about the coaching staff. But now we're going to talk about the Rookie Faceoff that's going to take place at Toyota Sports Center, Toyota Sports Performance Center, I think is what it's called now. I just call it TSC. But in El Segundo, where the Kings practice, where the Ontario Reign played for that bubble season, that's where it will be taking place. And this was brought about courtesy of the mayor. So huge hat tip to John Hoven, the mayor, for being the first to report this. He actually put on an article just today, as a matter of fact, or yesterday rather, with new details on the NHL Rookie Faceoff. And he actually said that this officially relaunched in 2018. And according to John Hoven, this will be taking place in September. It's a 2-week event, which occurs, he says in his article that every NHL player of significance has played at the WJCs around Christmas. And now, taking place in September, the NHL Rookie Faceoff is composed of 6 teams, but as we just heard, now it's going to be 7 teams. I'll get to that in a second. And it's going to be in Los Angeles this year. We got the Kings, the Ducks, the Sharks, the Golden Knights. We got Utah in there. I forget the other team, but also Seattle is going to be in the Rookie Faceoff as well. So we're going to have a ton of young talent on this team. We're going to see players that could make those teams. You could see future Reign players, future Gulls players, future Barracuda, future Silver Knights, future Firebirds players. So there's going to be a lot of talent in this tournament. Once again, it will be in Los Angeles this year. And John Hoven has the dates available. So Mayor's Manor confirmed that the dates are going to be Friday, September 13th. Yes, Friday the 13th to Monday, September 16th at Toyota Sports Performance Center in El Segundo. The Kings are going to play Vegas on Friday, Utah on Saturday, Anaheim Monday, September 16th, 3:30 p.m. That's going to be a fun one. Also, it's expected that both the Kings and the Ducks are going to debut their brand new jerseys. So if everyone wants to see a great jersey matchup, Monday, September 16th against the Kings. Ducks, Kings, 3:30 in El Segundo, new uniforms. I cannot wait. You're going to see a lot of good Kings rookies, a lot of good Ducks rookies, and there's going to be a ton of them. He did mention that there's going to be certain players on all teams. He mentioned some of the players on the Kings. Sam Hellenius, Francesco Pinelli is going to be an interesting one. So is Angus Booth from Shawinigan from the Quebec League. That's going to be an interesting one. Also, you have Jared Woolley, who they just selected in the draft. Goalies Eric Portillo and Carter George. According to Shang Peng, Macklin Celebrini is going to play in the Rookie Faceoff this summer. That's going to be really cool. So the Sharks are going to have Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, Sam Dickinson, Quentin Musty. Utah's going to have Tij Ginla and Cole Bedouin. The Ducks, according to John Hoven, you're going to see Stian maybe you'll see Stian Solberg. Not entirely sure on that because it's expected that Solberg is going to play in Sweden this season. And even though he signed his ELC, he's expected to play in Sweden in 24-25. So I'm not entirely sure if Solberg is going to come out, but he is listed on there. Leo Carlson could be on there. Pavel Mintyukov. Beckett Seneca is expected to play. So is Nathan Gaucher and Cutter Gauthier. There's some big names on all those rosters. When you have just by itself, when you have Leo Carlsson, Beckett Seneca, Cutter Gauthier, Minty on one side, when you have Tija Ginla on one side, when you have Macklin Celebrini on one side, you know it's going to go down pretty good. Oh, and you also have a couple of really solid players for Seattle. I mean, someone that I'm excited about to see is Jagger Firkus. If you're not familiar, Jagger Firkus had a couple of insane lacrosse goals, but me working for the Firebirds, I'm excited to see him. So a lot of terrific talent on tap this coming September. That's really only 2 months away. Oh my God. That's really close. So if you guys decide to come out to that, I would love to see most of you at the rookie camp. And yeah, just cannot wait for that. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this podcast. Once again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching. Before I conclude, here's what's coming up on the podcast. The next podcast, which is going to be Thursday morning, I have a conversation with John Chick from Locked On New York Rangers. I know at least one everydayer that is excited about that. So we'll be talking about the New York Rangers, talking about the Ducks, talking about a couple of players that have played on both teams. So that'll be an interesting conversation. Be sure to check that out. Later on Thursday, I'll be talking about the AHL schedule. The AHL schedule drops Thursday morning. So we're going to break all of that down and talk about some of the signings that just took place in San Diego. So in a sense, this will kind of be like a Goals Thursday. And maybe this will be the official final Goals Thursday or unofficial, but it'll happen to be on Thursday. So that's going to be talking about the goals, their schedule, their players, who to expect on San Diego's roster this season. So that's coming up. And later this week, I have a couple other things that I do want to talk about, and I haven't decided what that's going to be yet. So I got a couple ideas for later on in the week. Next week, we'll have some interviews and some special guests come on the show. So stay tuned for all of that. It's going to be exciting. You won't want to miss it. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, ad-free on Amazon. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Actually, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Do that right now. I'll give you a few seconds and I'll take a drink for you guys to hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and do that right now. It's hot. Have you done it yet? All right. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. You could email me at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks. My personal Twitter X is at StimpyJD. Once again, thank you all for your continued support. It is so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there, be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together.